Hey, welcome to Tools on Tech. This week I want to break down simple queries, give you all the building blocks you need in about 10 minutes so you can build any query you might need within Logseq and get the most out of all that data you were putting in there. Now let's start with the absolute basics. If you do /query, you get this, the live query builder. And if you click on it, you see that the core layout of a query is just curly brackets with query in the middle. This you always need, and you don't really need to memorize because Logseq will type it in for you if you press /query. Now the other core element that you need to know is how operators and functions work inside queries. Let me quickly show you how that looks. You always have these brackets, and then there is a function basically, and then values. Now, looking at that, that's a bit weird because if we do calculations, for example, you say 1 + 1 = 2, and that's not how Clojure works. I explained that one in previous videos, but I'm going to recap it because it's important. Clojure would look at this like this, and that would return 2. So that's a little mind shift. And in practice, how that looks is, for example, if you would be filtering on tasks, you say task, which is the function, and then you say what you would like to have. So like, for example, to do and later. This is a core element on how you build things within Simple Query, and we're going to dive into that more once we get to operators. Now, one of the nice things that we have the query builder is, while I'm going to talk about the code bit a lot in this video, you can find a lot of things by using the query builder. So for example, the one that I was showing you just now is if I go to query and then I would say, click on the plus, find that task function that I just had and do the same thing. I say to do and later, and click on the plus. Then that would build the query for me. And now if I click on live query, you basically see a combination of the things I just explained. You see that we have the query curly brackets that's around it, and we see one of these functions, task to do later, in it. So this query just gets me all the tasks that are in my system that are to do and later. Now it's important to remember that these brackets on the outside are important. A lot of times things go wrong because the brackets are in the wrong place. For example, you have brackets with spaces in them, or you have brackets where you need them and you don't have brackets where you don't need them. So for example, if I would build a query, I would go like this and I would forget the brackets. So I do something like this, the task to do doing, I would get an error because now it's not a function. Now it's looking actually for specific things. Now you can do something like aim for a page. So for example, if I have like an idea page, then that would work because I'm not using a function. I'm searching for something like a reference inside my table. And this is also where things get like a little bit confusing, and I'll dive into that when I talk references and the AND operator. So one of the bread and butter things that you want to do with a query is filter for specific tags. And this is one of the ways, for example, that I use to order my to-dos. I would tag something with a location. So let me give you there a nice example. Say I have the trash that needs to be put out. So I'm making a to-do and I'm saying like, put out trash. And that's something that I need to do at home. So what do? I add a tag and I use from GTD the @ symbol, which means that it's in a specific context, and I would say home. Now this thing has a tag to it that says at home, meaning that if I'm at home, I can put out the trash. And then I can build a simple query that would say, hey, I would like to get all the results that I have, and I want to say all the things at home. I say page references, and I say at home, and then it finds that to do. So now I have this at home query, but it also would show text that have a tag to it that aren't tasks. And that's the main operator that I use with queries, and that is task. And I say like anything that I need to do. And if I click on the plus here, then it makes a more complex query, and we're gonna break this down so you understand what's written here, because the query builder will help you, but understanding what goes on underwater is why you are here. So let's click on the live query and look at that query buildup. So you look at the query and we're going to break it up. So you have the outer part, which is the query itself. And then you see without a bracket around it, the reference towards home. And that is because it points towards a reference and it's not a function. And then after it comes a function, and that does start with the brackets, and it's a function task, which says like, find me all the tasks that are marked, whatever I put behind it. So in this case, just to do, but you could like do also to do, doing, now, later, to make like a full list and make sure everything gets captured. And then around that is another function that's and says all the things that are in here have to be marked or else we're not getting this set up. So if we go back and we look at the two lines that we have, then you see that I have this one to do, put out trash home, and that one matches because it is marked at home and it's marked to do. And then the next one, that one gets filtered out because it's marked with just the tag home, but it's not marked as a task to do. If you would go here and I would press Ctrl Enter and make it a to do, then you see that the query gets updated and it returns. But if it's not to do, but it's, for example, done, then it gets removed because we said we only want tasks that are on to do. And then of course we can go here. And this is like one of the points where the query builder lacks, right? I can't change it. I have to either rebuild it. So in those cases, I'm just going to go in here and say like, hey, I would also like to see all the things that are done. Ta-da! Now I've got both of them in my view by doing a quick adjustment. Okay, now let's dive into priority. Now I put this list here of 3 things and I'm going like, okay, these things are important, but some things are more important than others. So for example, feeding the cat, well, I won't be forgetting that one because it'll get remembered. Let's give that one a priority by going, give it priority A. You get priority A, B, and C. And that puts like a nice marker in front of it and say like, hey, this is priority A. Then I can go to my query that was already filtered for everything at home. And I say like, hey, I would like to see just the things that are my highest priority set. So again, I go to plus, I click priority, I say A, and I click on plus again, and it gets added. And now you see that I just get those priority A markers. And if you look at the query builder, there's not an extra and that gets added. And is like cumulative, so you can have multiple things in it. So this one says and it says home tagged, and task to do tagged, and priority A tags. Those 3 things must match to get like the result that we're having here. And that means that we only get one back. So for example, if I say that putting out the trash is priority A, then it will start popping up the moment I save it, as you see here. And if I say like, oh no, this is like less priority, I make it priority B, then it will disappear again from the list. It takes a second. And now it doesn't show that one. But I can go to things like my query and say like, hey, I would like to see priority A and B. And if I do something like that, then they both show up again. Now, in practice, of course, you might want to have a certain order in this. And one of the things that I do with things like priority is that I take a query like this, and I say like, hey, I would like to have everything in priority A. And I then just copy the whole query, put it under there, and give that one B. And now I have 2 queries, and the top query will tell me all my A priority things, so it will be on top. And the second query will tell me all my B priorities, which will be in the bottom. You could use advanced queries and then basically make a sorted list and make sure that everything's like nice and dandy and placed and in the right order. But this is just so much easier to set up. Just make a couple of queries and put them in the order that you want to see those queries. This is how I built my task list page, where I just have a bunch of queries in the order that I want to scroll through them. So first things that come in there, anything that I marked as doing, then I have like A, B, C's, and then all my other tasks are under it. And then I can just scroll through all the tasks and pick and mix whatever I would like to pick up. This is much easier to build than going straight into advanced queries. Now for the next one, we're going to look at between. And between is a property that gives you everything between a certain date, and that one's very much based on journal dates. So if we adjust our example here, we should get nothing because the to-dos that I made aren't on my journal page. They are on a sub page, so they don't have a date. Let's see if that's the case. I'm going to go here. I'm going to remove this last query. I'm going to go to this top one. I'm also going to remove this priority A1. Let me use the query builder. I still have to get used that I have this. Then I go to between, and I say, you can pick a date. So I can say like, hey, I want something that's between the 1st and the end of March. Now I have this set up and I get no results. Of course I don't get any results because I don't have any task in March that is marked at home. So let's go to my journal page and make one. So this is the last day of March. I say to do March example, and I would mark it as the at home as we just did. So now I made a task in March and I made it on a specific date, and you'll see it pop right back because the between is here and it shows you where the task is supposed to be happening. Now I hear you asking like, this is nice, but I'm not gonna enter dates every time I want to build a query, for example, to see what I needed to do last week. And that's totally fair, and that's why you can use like related dates. Unfortunately, you can't use them in the query builder. I tried, and I'm gonna show you, like if I go here and I delete this and I add like a new between, and I try using something like -7D, which means the last 7 days, then I just can't submit it. Like I don't get an entry. So this is something that we have to do in code still until this gets added. But it's not that hard. So I add the between, I say -7 days, but I can also say -1 week by using the W. But we're going to use -7 days and today. And that means that I want any task that was between 7 days ago and now. And if I click on that, you'll see this one happening, but that's not a good example because I just made one. So let's go to a specific date, and let's go like a week ago, so the 21st. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to make another to do. And we're going to go back, and you still don't see it showing up. Now, if I go back to this one, to this between, and I say like, hey, let's turn that one into -2 weeks. Then you see the result happening. So with the between, you can really figure out where tasks are. And of course, this also works in the plus. So you can say something like between today and +7 days if you have any tasks scheduled for the future to see what's heading your way. Now let's dive in some of the really neat features of Logseq, and that is properties. I made these 2 entries here for play games, and I'm going to give them a property. So I click on the to do, I press Shift Enter, so I stay within the block, and I'm going to say System. I'm going to say I'm going to play games on the Xbox. And then once I've done that one, I'm going to make a new one here as well. Also going to Shift Enter, and because System is now known, I can just do 2 colons and then type System, and it will show you all the values it knows. In this case, Xbox, but I'm going to add PlayStation. I might add Switch as well, but no need. So now I have these 2 tasks. What can I do with these properties that I just added? Now let's go back to our live query that's under here. I'm going to remove the between because I want the things that are on this page, and you can like see the entries that are made here. And you also see the entries that are in the journal. And then I'm going to say like, hey, I want only the tasks that have the property system. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to say property. I'm going to type in system. And then I can also pick if I want to have just the PlayStation ones or just the Xbox ones or just all. I'm going to pick all in this case. If you look at the query, you see that property system. And then I just get to-dos that are marked system. And now we get to like one of the really cool features because I can go up the top here and turn it into a table. And then I not just have like an overview of all these blocks, but I also have like a list of that property behind it. So in this case, showing me on what system and in what block. And it's going to get even more funky once we get into page properties, which I'll show right after this. You know, this is on this page. You might not care about the page. So you can click on this one and say like, nah, just leave the page out of it. And so you can like update your list, and you can also sort. And as we just see, also filter. So saying like, hey, I just want the Xbox stuff. Let's remove this one. Go here to property. Say that I want some system, and I just want the Xbox lines. And then I'll just get the Xbox. So using properties really makes it possible for you to slice and dice all the blocks that you are making. And I'm going to give you like a quick example how I use that for pages. Now that we had block properties, let's look at page properties. And one of the strongest ways for me to use page properties is by using them inside my journal, because there's things that I can track over time. Let me give you a quick example here. I need to keep track of the hours that I work, and it's not that I have to keep track of like every minute. For that, I would need a much more fine-grained method or use it per block. But I need to keep track of like, did I work 8 hours or 6 hours on a day? You know, did I go home early, for example? And the way I do that is I have a template that I start every day and that adds hours as a first block property. So let's say I worked 8 hours today, and then I get this like in my journal on the top, it says like hours is 8. Now I prep this. So if I go back, you see that I got a couple of hours filled in. And then what I can do is I can click and it already shows me this data because I've already done this before. But if I go to that, I get to the hours page, which is the page for the property. And I created a small query that basically says nothing else except page property hours. So let's build this from scratch. I say query and I go page property. So you got property here, but I said like, no, I want pages. I go pages. I say property again. I say hours. I say select all. And then what happens is I get this list of all the dates in my calendar and the hours worked, created at, because it's a page, so it knows when it's created and when it's updated. And I also experiment a bit with mood, as you can see here. Then let's sort it at the page level. And that means that now I get back and go like, hey, if I fill in my timesheet, I can open this and I just see like the hours that I filled in every day, and I can type it in to my timesheets in like 10 seconds flat, because I got all the information that I need over the last few days. Using page properties is super useful, not just in things like the journal, but also in things like types. So for example, I make lists for books. So who's the author? When was it written? What rating did I give it? I use it for projects. Is it still active? Who's involved? What priority does it have? Any type of thing that I want to put on a page, I can add these page properties to, and then use the simple query builder to filter for those properties and get the results back in the order that I need them. This is a really powerful function, and I highly recommend just playing around with it a bit and figuring out what kind of workflows you would like to use this for. Remember, if you're making a workflow, start with the end in mind. So for example, this one was, hey, I have to fill in this timesheet every week. I need to keep track of the hours every day. Now, before I dive into operators, if you like my content and want to help me out, check out my Patreon link down below. I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do with it, but at least it will have early postings of my videos while I can still do something with the feedback that I get, answer questions from people, and take recommendations on videos or topics that I should handle next. So let's dive into operators. And operators are three shapes. We have and, or, and not. And what they do is that they manipulate if you want something yes or no in your setup. And we've already seen, so it automatically happens if you're using the query builder. If you start combining properties that you want to see, then and will put those together, and you will only get results if all the things are matched. So and it's a to-do, and it's at work, and it's a priority A. Those things combined result into a thing. Then or is just a tad different, because that one says like any of these things can match, and then we can start adding it already. Now I'll put a quick example up here, and what you can see is that I updated the list. I added a at work tag, and I made this small query. So I said and, so all the things that are in here are and then the first element in that is an or, and what it does, and let me see if I can select just this part, is it says or home or work and then a task. So that means that it has to be a task, and it has to have either home or work or both. Both is good. So you see the result coming back, which is basically the whole list. If I remove home somewhere, let's say then I change this one to phone, then that one gets removed because I didn't say that I wanted to have phone as well. So or is very nice if you're making combined lists of different types and you want to put them together. And then finally we have not, and not is just the negation. So if we're going back to the example that I was just showing, where you see, hey, look, I've got this one, and I'm saying like, I would like to get all the tasks in my system. So we're going cleaning this one up, I say just tasks. And I would say like, but I don't want to see any of the at home stuff. So I'm going to go not, and then say not at home. And then if I get a result, I get a whole bunch of tasks because it goes through my whole system and gets all the tasks that I have, with the exception of things like put out the trash. So let's make this a bit simpler by saying by and that we have here, and going like, let me get me some priority. So priority, and I just want to get A. And then you get like a couple of things, but you'll see that none of these ones are in there because none of these ones are at home. So if I take the call center one here with phone and I would like add priority A to it, this one would match because it's a to-do, it has a priority of A, and it is not at home. And looking back at that, this gets updated and call contact is there. So the not parameter is mostly if you want to remove something from the list. One of the ways that I use it very often is I have a tag called NF, which I mean no filter. And I add that if I want to remove something from all my filters. So very often I have a not NF at the end of my streak of queries. And that means that I can clean up long lists that I have with elements that I don't want to change so that they automatically fall out of the filter, but I still don't want them in my end results because I'm either done with them or because they're just a thought or a comment that were added and they were cluttering up my view. Now, simple queries are nice, but they're not perfect. If I try messing around with them, very often things will break. So if I'm looking at this example where I said like, hey, I made an or, I said like either or home or phone, and then I said like, but not, like I tried to reverse that. That doesn't work. I just get both of them back. So in most cases, if it's not working, try to break it down into smaller pieces. I usually take a processing order where I say like I have and then I have like all the lines in there, and I make multiple nots or ors in there if I have to build my query. If you're going like 3 layers deep, then maybe it's better to start diving into something like advanced queries. Try to limit it to around 2 layers deep. So just and then under and things like not or, but not what I'm doing here, and then not, and then or, where you go like 3 layers into the whole system. Okay, so I'm mostly focused on how to do it in text, and that is deliberate because while the query builder is nice, it isn't perfect, and if it starts giving weird results, you'll have to dive in the code to fix it. So knowing how these elements fit together really help you to either debug or build a little bit more complex queries without things breaking down. Remember, you're awesome. Keep it up and see you in the next one.